More and more countries are making moves to separate themselves and their reliance on the US dollar as a reserve currency. The US dollar has been the primary currency used for global trade for decades, but trade using other currencies like the Chinese yuan have increased significantly. Western sanctions against Russia led to a surge in ruble yuan trade by over 1,000% in 2022. In February of this year, Brazil and Argentina announced intentions to create their own common currency. And earlier this month, BRICS nations, including Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, said they are working on a common currency, all in an attempt to ditch the US dollar. So what does the future of the king dollar look like, and what does it mean for Canada? Joining us now to unpack this further is Mr. Peter Earle, an economist at the American Institute for Economic Research and a former Wall Street trader. Mr. Earle, thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, there seems to be a growing shift toward using other currencies for global trade deals, and not only by rivals Russia and China, but smaller nations are also taking part. So what is really driving this push toward de-dollarization?
I think there are two major reasons for the increased interest in non-dollar media of international exchange. The first is the growing use of dollar payment systems and dollar FX reserves as a sanctioning tool, which effectively makes it difficult for a targeted nation to engage in international trade. And the second is the latest trend in U.S. monetary and fiscal policy, which are more and more error-prone and unpredictable.
All right, Mr. Earle. Now, earlier this month, I want to point to a recent article that you posted. You highlighted a trade agreement between China and resource-rich Brazil. So it seems that China is one of the top contenders when it comes to this de-dollarization push. And given its dominant position in global trade currently, what do we know so far about the growth of the Chinese yuan?
Well, at present, the Chinese yuan is really not a realistic competitor for the dollar. China has a closed capital account, and the yuan is actually pegged to the US dollar and doesn't float. However, China has been working and building financial and technological connections to about 40 central banks. They offer an oil futures contract denominated in yuan. And so they're slowly developing the infrastructure. But a lot of huge things would have to happen internally in China to challenge the dollar in a serious way.
All right. Now, if we look at the IMF, it says the US dollar accounted for 58.36% of global foreign exchange reserves in the fourth quarter of 2022. So it does remain the dominant trade currency. However, in 1999, it was at 70%. So what do we know so far about the speed of the US dollar's digression from 1999?
Well, the loss of market share, you might call it, of the dollar since 1999 really comes down to one thing, and that's the introduction of the euro. If you look in SWIFT, which is a dollar messaging system, which has been around since the 70s, the dollar makes up about 45% of transactions currently, the euro about 33%.
All right. Now, meanwhile, as we mentioned, a broader group of nations, BRICS nations, announced their intentions to develop their own currency. So what would this new currency mean for the US dollar's, what it looks like to be a declining trajectory?
Well, and this is the big if the BRICS currency were to gain usage, it would challenge use of the dollar. And what people has interested in this BRICS project, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is that some of the early discussions see it as being backed by the commodities that those regions are known to have. So oil, copper, nickel, maybe rare earth metals, that kind of thing. That would make such a currency a little more attractive than simply being another piece of paper floating around the world and could make it more competitive.
All right, Mr. Earle, just over a minute left here, but time for some more broader questions for our viewers. So what does de-dollarization mean for global economies and more particularly North America's?
In the short term, it probably means nothing. It might not even be noticeable if it were to happen. But taken to its full implications, it could mean less demand for the dollar, and over time, less demand for U.S. Treasury securities, which could impact not only Americans but most nations of the world in time.
And staying on the note of this actually happening, what does a multipolar currency world look like, and is it necessarily a bad thing, Mr. Earle?
No, the multipolar reserve currency scenario is sort of what we have right now. And in the 1940s and 1950s, we had that between the dollar and the British pound. But it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing, not at all.
All right. So what is your overall outlook when it comes to de-dollarization and its trajectory?
My personal view is that it's starting to pick up steam, but still has many, many years to go. It's something for nerdy economists like me to watch, but for Americans, Canadians, Europeans, really not to worry about. There's a lot more pressing issues for most citizens to think about right now.
All right, Mr. Earle, thank you again for your time today on Forum Daily.
Thanks for having me.